What if I told you the oldest myth in history is not a fairy tale, but a warning? What if I told you that long before kings, before empires, before oil barons and dictators, there was a tyrant in the sky who ruled exactly the same way, hoarding energy, starving the people, and crushing anyone who dared to resist? Tonight, we reveal the hidden truth of Zeus and Prometheus, the story of a god who ruled like a dictator and the titan who stole fire to set humanity free. Welcome, traveler. You've stepped into a place where myths are stripped of their golden masks, where legends bleed into reality. This channel is not here to entertain you with bedtime stories. It is here to uncover what was buried, dark truths hidden inside the tales we thought we knew. Because myths are not harmless fantasies. They are coded messages about power, oppression, and resistance. And none is darker or more urgent than the tale of Prometheus, the titan who defied heaven itself. In the myth, Zeus forbids mankind from using fire. Fire was more than warmth. It was technology, industry, the seed of civilization itself, and by banning it, Zeus ensured that mortals would remain weak, crawling in the mud like insects under his thunder. Prometheus, whose name means foresight, could not bear it. He saw the cruelty, he saw the injustice, and he made the choice to steal the flame. But understand this, Prometheus was not punished for betraying the gods. He was punished for empowering the powerless. And that, my friends, is the part of the story they never want you to see. Because this myth is not just about ancient Greece, it's about us. It's about now. Think of dictators today, hoarding oil, gas, electricity. Think of nations where palaces shine with golden chandeliers while the streets below go dark from blackouts. Think of how fuel prices rise and people starve while corporations report record profits. Energy has always been fire. Fire has always been power, and power, when stolen from tyrants, is always punished. In the beginning, humankind was small. They crawled in mud huts, shivered through nights, and watched beasts devour them in forests. They had no fire, no tools, no protection. To the heavens above, they were nothing but ants. And presiding over that endless fear was Zeus, the self-proclaimed king of the gods. Zeus ruled not with justice, but with terror. He forbade mortals from touching fire. To him, fire was not warmth. Fire was power, and power, once shared, unravels thrones. He knew that if mankind gained it, they would no longer kneel. And so he hoarded it, locking it away as a dictator hoards oil fields or monopolizes energy grids in our own age. Look closer, reader. This is no distant myth. Consider the oil kingdoms where rulers live in palaces of glass while citizens beg for bread. Think of regimes where fuel prices rise and entire nations collapse into hunger riots. Think of corporate cartels who choke pipelines, controlling the flame of modern civilization, petroleum, gas, electricity. The pattern is ancient. Zeus was the first tyrant of energy, and humanity the first slaves of scarcity. The omniscient eye sees what mortals could not. They were chained, not by iron, but by absence. Without fire, they could not cook their food, forge their weapons, or warm their children. They were as serfs beneath landlords, paying tribute in silence to the gods of sky. And when thunder cracked, they whispered to themselves, "We are nothing, we cannot rise." But not every god agreed. There was one who looked down and did not see vermin. He saw brothers. His name was Prometheus. His very name, the foresighted one, marked him as dangerous to the tyrant in the clouds. Where Zeus saw subjects, Prometheus saw equals. Where Zeus hoarded power, Prometheus longed to give it away. He watched men huddle in darkness, dying like cattle, and his heart raged against the cruelty. He understood that fire was more than flame. It was knowledge, technology, revolution. Fire was the tool that turned slaves into citizens. So Prometheus resolved to steal it, not for glory, not for rebellion, but to ignite the dawn of human freedom. And here lies the hidden truth. Prometheus was not punished for betraying Olympus. He was punished for empowering the powerless. Just as whistleblowers today vanish when they expose oil dynasties, just as reformers are jailed when they demand fair energy for the poor, Prometheus was chained to a mountain for daring to say, "The flame belongs to all." Thus begins the legend. The legend of the first revolutionary. The legend of a tyrant in the sky, desperate to keep men on their knees. The legend of Prometheus, who stole the fire and paid with eternal pain. A crown of clouds, a throne of thunder, and a fist that gripped not justice, but fear. This was Zeus. To the poets, he was father of gods and men, keeper of order, guardian of law. But to the eye that sees beyond myth, he was the architect of tyranny. His kingdom was not built on worship, but on dependency. His empire was not sustained by love, but by control. Zeus ruled as every despot rules, by hoarding what sustains life. In his time, it was fire. In ours, it is oil and energy. Think of the dynasties that sit atop oceans of crude oil, building towers that scrape the heavens while the streets below crumble. Think of corporations that boast of record profits as households shiver in winter and paychecks vanish at the pump. The modern gods do not hurl thunderbolts, they raise prices. But the effect is the same. The people are chained. From his throne on Olympus, Zeus dictated the fate of mortals. He gave them just enough rain for crops, just enough sunshine for survival, but never the flame. Fire was reserved for the divine, just as power grids and energy reserves are now reserved for the ruling class. Zeus feared nothing more than mortals who no longer needed him. He knew what every ruler knows. The day your subjects stop needing you, your reign begins to rot. And so he wrapped himself in propaganda. To the masses, he was not a tyrant, he was a father. He claimed his thunder kept chaos at bay, just as modern regimes claim their control keeps order, or that their stranglehold on resources protects stability. But stability for whom? For the palaces, not the people. For the throne, not the earth below it. The omniscient narrator sees the cracks in the mask. We see how power corrupts the story itself. Myths were written by poets who feared Zeus. They painted him as noble because to paint him otherwise was dangerous. But beneath the hymn, he was simply a despot clutching the sky, and like all despots, he grew paranoid. He feared the rise of rivals. He feared rebellion in the ranks. Most of all, he feared prophecy. The whisper that one day his own bloodline would overthrow him, just as he had overthrown his father Cronus. A tyrant's greatest terror is always the future, and Zeus sought to strangle it, just as he strangled the flame. Thus the heavens themselves became a reflection of empire. The gods grew fat while mortals starved. Fire, the key to progress, was locked away, and the king of the gods sat on his storm-forged throne, convincing himself that eternity was his. But eternity never belongs to tyrants. It was in this age of thunder and oppression that Prometheus arose, not as a loyal servant of Olympus, but as its first great betrayer. For what tyrants fear most is not rebellion, it is illumination. And Prometheus was already dreaming of fire. In every age of tyranny, there rises one figure who dares to see beyond the present. In the age of Zeus, that figure was Prometheus. Prometheus was not like the others of his kind. He was a titan, descendant of the old order that Zeus himself had destroyed. Yet he had chosen to stand beside Olympus during the great war against Cronus. He had watched gods and monsters clash, watched the sky itself crack open under the weight of rebellion. And in that war, he made a choice, not out of loyalty to Zeus, but out of loyalty to the future. For Prometheus's gift was foresight. He did not see the world as it was. He saw the world as it could be. Where Zeus saw men as vermin, Prometheus saw builders. Where Olympus saw mortals as slaves, he saw creators waiting to be unshackled. But foresight is a dangerous gift. It is the seed of defiance, the whisper that says, "This world is not enough," and those who hear it can never again bow their heads in silence. Prometheus looked upon humanity in the age of darkness, shivering in caves, dying from cold and hunger, their children snatched by beasts. And his heart burned hotter than any forge. He could not accept it. He would not accept it. For he knew that fire, the sacred flame hoarded by Olympus, was the key that would change everything. Think of what fire meant. Not just warmth, but technology. Not just survival, but civilization. With fire, man could cook his food, forge his weapons, drive back the beasts of night. With fire, he could harden bricks into cities, melt ore into plows, strike sparks into engines of progress. Fire was the first step on the path to independence, and Prometheus understood the brutal truth. Zeus feared fire for the same reason despots today fear education or fear energy in the hands of the people. A population that can heat its homes, fuel its machines, or think for itself is a population that no longer kneels. That is why regimes burn books. That is why cartels choke pipelines. That is why dictators silence teachers and scientists. Fire is knowledge. Knowledge is freedom. Freedom is death to tyrants. The omniscient narrator sees it clearly. Prometheus was not merely a god of foresight. He was the archetype of every whistleblower, every dissident, every revolutionary who ever dared to say, "The future belongs to all, not to the throne." And so, in the silence of Olympus, Prometheus made his decision. He would betray heaven. He would steal the forbidden flame. Not for glory, not for revenge, but for humanity. And in that single act, the fate of gods and men would be forever changed, for the Titan who saw the future was about to light it. Every tyranny has its forbidden treasure. For pharaohs, it was literacy. For emperors, it was steel. For modern dictators, it is oil and power grids. For Zeus, it was fire. The flame was no ordinary element. In Olympus, it was sacred, locked within the forge of Hephaestus, guarded like a crown jewel. To the gods, it was their birthright. To mortals, it was a dream, unreachable, untouchable, unthinkable. Zeus decreed that mankind would never possess it, and so the flame burned only for the halls of Olympus, where ambrosia glowed and gods feasted, while below, humanity froze in shadows. The omniscient narrator sees the pattern. The hoarding of fire is the oldest form of monopoly. It is the same pattern we see today when oil barons seal their wells, when pipelines are shut to entire nations, when energy is rationed not by necessity but by profit. Fire, oil, electricity, different names, same chains. Control the flame, and you control the future. Prometheus knew this, and in his foresight, he saw the only way to break those chains: theft, not negotiation, not prayer. Theft. One night, as the vaults of Olympus shimmered with celestial light, Prometheus descended in silence. He walked the marble halls of the gods, past feasts where immortals drank nectar, oblivious to the suffering below. He approached the great forge of Hephaestus, where sparks leapt like stars and molten rivers glowed. There it was, the forbidden flame, eternal and untouchable. To steal from Zeus was no simple crime. It was treason. It was rebellion. It was the first great strike against divine authority. And yet Prometheus did not hesitate. He reached into the fire, searing his hands, and concealed its light within the hollow stalk of a fennel plant. A simple reed, fragile and unassuming, yet inside it, the future of mankind burned. And here lies the twist. The first act of liberation in human history was not a war, nor a revolution, but a theft. A theft so daring that even today, it echoes in every act of whistleblowing, every hacktivist breaching firewalls, every protester smuggling truth out of the vaults of the powerful. Prometheus was not just stealing fire, he was stealing monopoly. When he returned to Earth and lit the first human hearth, the world changed. Darkness retreated, food cooked, metal bent, beasts fled. Humanity, once slaves to the night, now stood upright, faces glowing in the firelight. For the first time, they were not prey, they were creators. But Prometheus knew what every rebel knows: the tyrant does not forgive. The gods would see the smoke rising from mortal homes. Zeus would know the flame had been stolen, and the thunder would come. Thus, with a single spark, the war between heaven and humanity began. Prometheus had given mortals the forbidden flame and sealed his own fate in chains. The first spark was small, a whisper against the night, but revolutions are born from whispers. When Prometheus placed the stolen flame into mortal hands, the world itself trembled. The age of darkness cracked open, and light spilled into places where light had never been. For the first time, man did not bow before the cold. He pushed it back. They gathered around the fire in awe. Fingers once numb reached out to its warmth. Faces once hidden in shadow glowed red and gold. The night was no longer a tyrant. The beast that once prowled at the edge of caves recoiled, terrified of this new force. Humanity, so long a victim, had discovered its weapon. But the flame was more than survival. It was transformation. Meat seared instead of rotting, metal bent beneath hammer and heat, weapons sharpened into blades, not stones. Villages formed around hearths. Songs and stories were told beneath dancing sparks. Civilization itself rose from fire's glow. The omniscient narrator sees the pattern clearly. Fire is the first technology, but also the first rebellion. And history repeats in every age. Just as mortals forge their future with flame, modern people build theirs with electricity, with engines, with the internet. Each time, tyrants resist. Each time, rulers insist the masses are not ready. And each time, the people prove them wrong. Think of the industrial age, when coal and steam broke the grip of monarchies. Think of the digital age, when information slipped from the fists of governments and spread across the globe. The rulers always say, "You cannot have this, it is too dangerous." And yet, the people always take it. Prometheus lives in every factory whistle, in every protest for free information, in every blackout where candles burn defiantly. But with awakening comes danger. Smoke rose from mortal fires, curling skyward like a signal, a taunt. On Olympus, the gods saw it. Zeus saw it. And his heart filled not with admiration, but with dread. For in those sparks he saw his nightmare, a humanity no longer on its knees. The truth is chilling. The powerful fear nothing more than the powerless discovering their own strength. And Zeus, like every dictator before and after him, realized that the monopoly had been broken. Thus, humanity awakened. But with each rising flame, thunder gathered on the horizon. For freedom's first light is always followed by the storm. Thunder is the language of tyrants, and Zeus spoke it well. When the first plumes of smoke rose from mortal villages, the heavens grew restless. On Olympus, laughter stilled. The scent of roasted meat, of smelted ore, carried upward like blasphemy. To gods who dined on ambrosia, it was an insult. To Zeus, it was treason. He saw the glow of countless fires spreading across the earth and understood what it meant. Mankind was no longer crawling. They were building, they were rising, and nothing terrifies a ruler more than subjects who no longer need him. Zeus's fury shook the mountains. Clouds gathered at his command. Thunder growled like a caged beast. He hurled bolts of lightning into forests, into fields, burning villages to ash. He sought to remind mortals that their flame was nothing compared to his storm. Yet the people, for the first time, did not scatter in fear. They clung to their fires. They rebuilt. And Zeus realized that the true rebellion had begun. The omniscient narrator unveils the truth. This was not wrath alone. This was strategy. Every tyrant knows that the first step against rebellion is terror. The second is punishment. Think of regimes today. When citizens march for fuel or fair wages, they face riot police. When people protest in oil states, their leaders send tanks, not aid. When whistleblowers reveal corruption in energy monopolies, they vanish into prisons. The thunder is eternal. It changes form, but never purpose. And so Zeus devised a punishment not only for mortals, but for the one who betrayed him. Prometheus. For the tyrant cannot allow a symbol. He cannot allow the people to believe that rebellion is possible. Prometheus had become a myth before the myth was even written, a titan who had stolen the monopoly of heaven. If he were allowed to stand unpunished, the fire would spread beyond control. Thus Zeus's wrath became personal. His rage demanded an example, a spectacle of suffering that would echo through eternity. Not merely death, for death is release, but torment, endless torment. And so the tyrant raised his hand, not only against mortals, but against the God who dared to love them. The sky would thunder, the chains would rattle, and Prometheus would pay the price of fire with blood unending. Tyranny does not kill its enemies, it chains them where all can see. Prometheus was seized, not by mortal soldiers, but by the hands of gods themselves. He was dragged across the heavens, his body scraping against the stones of Olympus, then hurled downward into the barren wilderness. The mountains of Caucasus rose like teeth against the sky, jagged, merciless, unreachable. Here, Zeus decreed, the Titan would hang, not hidden, but displayed. Chains of unbreakable bronze coiled around his wrists and ankles, forged in the furnaces of Hephaestus. They bit into his flesh, cold and eternal. The wind howled across the peaks, slicing him with icy blades. Below, the world stretched in silence, forests, rivers, villages that now burned with stolen fire. Prometheus could see it all, yet could not move. That was the genius of Zeus's cruelty. He turned punishment into spectacle. The omniscient truth is this: tyrants never simply destroy their enemies. They stage them. They crucify them in public squares, exile them to barren islands, broadcast their trials across glowing screens. Think of dissidents paraded in handcuffs, whistleblowers locked away where all can watch in fear. The punishment is not for the rebel alone. It is for the people. It whispers, "See what happens when you defy." And so Prometheus became the first political prisoner. His cell was the mountain. His bars were the sky. His sentence was forever. Yet even chained, he did not bow. His eyes, burning brighter than the flame he had stolen, gazed upon humanity. He saw the smoke still rising from mortal hearths, stubborn against the storm. And in that moment, Zeus's plan faltered. For though his chains bound Prometheus's body, they could not bind the idea he had already set free. And there he hung, nailed to the bones of the earth, the Titan in chains, not defeated but displayed. Proof that tyranny fears the flame even when it burns in the hearts of men. Chains alone were not enough. Tyranny craves spectacle, but it also craves suffering. And Zeus invented a torment that would echo through eternity. From the storm clouds above, he summoned a creature vast and merciless, an eagle of monstrous size, feathers black as obsidian, eyes burning like molten gold. It circled the peaks of Caucasus, wings slicing the sky, until its shadow swallowed Prometheus whole. Then it descended. The eagle's beak pierced his flesh, talons tore through ribs. It reached into his chest and feasted upon his liver, the seat of life itself. Prometheus screamed, not once, not twice, but endlessly. Yet this was no ordinary agony, for each night his body healed, each dawn the eagle returned. And so the cycle began. Death without release, pain without end. This was Zeus's masterpiece of cruelty, a punishment designed not to kill, but to erase hope. Prometheus would suffer, not for hours, not for years, but forever. And the gods would watch, satisfied that rebellion had been nailed to the mountain and consumed by the sky. But the omniscient narrator reveals the deeper truth. This was not myth, but metaphor. Every regime invents its eagle. The eagle is the gulag that breaks bones and sends men home hollow. The eagle is the torture chamber where prisoners are shattered, only to be dragged back again. The eagle is the endless poverty cycle that devours the poor generation after generation, yet never kills them. Because the tyrant does not want martyrs. He wants examples. Think of the whistleblower imprisoned for life, isolated, fed scraps of light, while their work is picked apart by those in power. Think of nations bled by sanctions, their people starving each year while rulers grow richer. Think of workers who rebuild after every collapse, only to be crushed again by rising prices, inflation, and debt. The eagle is eternal. It is the system that eats you alive, then spits you back out, only to eat you again. And yet, amid the shrieks and the tearing of flesh, Prometheus did not surrender. His eyes still burned with defiance. Even in agony, he remained a beacon to mortals. For every scream was also a song, a reminder that freedom is bought with suffering, and that tyranny can chain the body but never extinguish the fire of rebellion. So the eagle feasted, day after day, age after age, a banquet of blood upon the mountain. But it was not Prometheus who was truly devoured. It was the illusion of Zeus's eternal power. Tyrants chain bodies, but they fear words even more, and Prometheus carried a word that could topple the heavens. Bound to the Caucasus, flesh torn daily by the eagle, Prometheus still held a secret in silence, a secret not of fire, but of destiny. For long before the flames were stolen, he had glimpsed the threads of fate. He knew what Zeus feared most, that one day the throne of Olympus would fall. And it would not be by rebellion of titans, nor by the hands of mortals, but by Zeus's own bloodline. The prophecy was simple but devastating. A son of Zeus would be born who would end his reign. This truth burned brighter than fire. It meant Zeus's rule was not eternal. It was fragile, temporary, doomed from within. And so long as Prometheus refused to speak the name, Zeus would tremble. The king of gods, master of thunder, sat on his throne of clouds, yet could not sleep. For each night he heard the echoes of prophecy and the screams of the chained titan. The omniscient narrator unmasks the metaphor. Every dictatorship fears prophecy, not the divine kind, but the inevitability of collapse. Monarchies crumble under revolution. Empires rot under corruption. Oil dynasties cling to power even as their wells dry. Tyrants know that the very system they build will one day consume them. Their greatest terror is not enemies, it is inevitability. Think of kings who silenced prophets, only for their kingdoms to shatter. Think of dictators who executed journalists, only to be undone by their own children's greed. Think of corporations that suppressed warnings of climate collapse, only to face storms, floods, and wildfires that no prophet could contain. This is the modern prophecy, that every system built on exploitation will collapse under the weight of its own chains. And Prometheus, nailed to his mountain, embodied that inevitability. He did not need to escape to win. His suffering was a mirror, reflecting Zeus's fear back at him. For each drop of blood, each scream torn by the eagle whispered the same truth. You are not eternal. You will be overthrown. Zeus hurled thunderbolts, but thunder cannot silence fate. He tightened chains, but chains cannot bind prophecy. The fire Prometheus had given to man was already spreading, and the prophecy he kept in silence gnawed at the very heart of Olympus. Thus Prometheus suffered, but he also triumphed. For even in chains, he was the one who held the future. And the tyrant of heaven, god of thunder, master of storms, was revealed to be a prisoner of fear. Tyrants never strike only the rebel. They strike the people who dared to benefit from rebellion. Zeus could not extinguish the flame. Mortals clung to it, rebuilt their fires, and for the first time stood tall against the night. But if he could not take the fire away, he could curse those who held it. And so he devised a new punishment, not for Prometheus, but for mankind itself. From the clay of the earth, Zeus commanded Hephaestus to shape a woman. She was sculpted with perfection, beauty unmatched, charm irresistible, eyes bright as dawn. The gods gave her every gift, grace, wit, allure. Her name would be Pandora, the all-gifted. But among her gifts was a hidden poison, wrapped in seduction. For Zeus's creation was not a blessing, she was a weapon. Into her hands he placed a jar, a vessel sealed tight, containing what mortals had never known: disease, famine, jealousy, greed, war. And he sent her down to earth, a bride adorned, carrying a dowry that would damn the world. Mortals, dazzled by her beauty, welcomed her. And when the jar was opened, whether by her hand or by human curiosity, its contents spilled into the world. Pestilence swept through villages. Hunger gnawed at bellies. Violence turned neighbor against neighbor. The flame had brought progress, but Pandora's jar brought suffering, endless and merciless. Only one thing remained trapped within when the lid was slammed shut: hope. The omniscient narrator unmasks the metaphor. Pandora was not a woman. She was policy. She was sanction. She was debt. Every tyrant, when unable to extinguish rebellion, curses the people who rebel. Think of dictators who poison their own nations with famine when power is threatened. Think of regimes that unleash wars to distract from their fragility. Think of economies shackled with inflation, where the poor suffer while rulers feast. Pandora's jar is opened again and again in every century. And what of hope? Was it mercy, left as comfort, or was it cruelty, trapping mankind in the cycle of enduring without end? To give just enough optimism so that the oppressed continue to endure their chains. Scholars have debated for centuries whether hope was a blessing or a curse. Tyrants understand it well. Despair breeds revolt, but controlled hope breeds obedience. Thus, Zeus's vengeance was complete. Prometheus was chained in agony. Mankind was chained in misery. Fire burned in their hands, but curses burned in their hearts. And Zeus sat upon Olympus, convinced that he had preserved his throne. But every curse has a flaw, for in the ashes of suffering, mortals learned resilience. And in the embers of hope, a spark still glowed, waiting to ignite against heaven once more. The flame gave man power. Pandora's jar gave him pain, and together they forged the first true age of humanity, an age of suffering. Villages rose around hearths, but sickness now walked among them. Families gathered around fires, but hunger lingered at the edges. Neighbors forged tools, yet envy sharpened blades against each other. From the jar spilled not only plagues of the body, but plagues of the mind, jealousy, greed, rage. What Prometheus had given lifted men up, but what Zeus had cursed dragged them back down. This was the genius of tyranny, to ensure that freedom would never feel free. Mortals now held the power to change their world, yet every step forward was met with pain. Every invention carried risk. Every fire cast a shadow. The omniscient narrator reveals the pattern. This is how control survives. Tyrants never deny entirely. They corrupt. They allow progress, but lace it with suffering. So too in our world, electricity flows, yet millions freeze when prices soar. Food is abundant, yet famine strikes where markets collapse. Medicines exist, yet pandemics spread when profit outweighs compassion. The age of suffering is not ancient, it is now. And still, humanity endured. They buried their dead, then lit fires to honor them. They starved, yet shared scraps to survive another winter. They fought, yet built again on the ruins. Zeus believed he had cursed them into despair, but despair did not kill them. It hardened them. Even hope, trapped at the bottom of Pandora's jar, proved dangerous. For though hope can enslave by promising relief that never comes, it can also ignite rebellion. A people who believe tomorrow might be better will endure today's agony long enough to reach it. And so the flame kept burning, not just in hearths, but in hearts. Prometheus, chained to his mountain, saw it all. The eagle feasted, his blood stained the rocks, yet his eyes watched the fires below. He saw mankind stumbling, suffering, yet refusing to surrender. And though agony consumed him, a grim smile touched his lips. For even Zeus, in all his cruelty, could not stop the simple truth. Once fire is given, it cannot be taken back. Thus the age of suffering began. But in the crucible of pain, mortals were tempered like steel. And one day, the chains meant to break them would instead break the tyrant. When Pandora's jar was emptied, one thing remained, a fragile light, flickering in the darkness. They called it hope, but hope, like fire, is never innocent. Mortals clung to it desperately. Amid plague, famine, and war, they whispered, "Tomorrow will be better." When the eagle tore at Prometheus, he too whispered it, though his lips bled, "One day, these chains will break." Hope kept them alive. It carried them through winters, through graves, through endless cycles of suffering. But the omniscient narrator unmasks the paradox. Was hope a blessing or a trap? To some, hope was salvation. It kept mortals from surrendering to despair. Without it, they might have perished altogether. To others, hope was the cruelest curse Zeus could devise, for it taught men to endure the unendurable. It lulled them into waiting, into patience, into obedience. A tyrant does not need to kill rebellion if he can seduce it into waiting for tomorrow. The pattern endures. Consider the worker told that if he endures poverty now, wealth will come later. Consider the citizen told that if she accepts injustice now, justice will arrive someday. Consider the patient promised a cure soon while corporations profit from delay. Hope keeps societies quiet as they rot, promising that the storm will pass, while the storm never ends. And yet, hope is double-edged. For sometimes, the same ember that pacifies can ignite. The same whisper that lulls can roar into defiance. History turns on the moment when hope shifts from passive to active, when it becomes not endurance, but resistance. When mortals stop saying, "Tomorrow will save us," and begin to say, "We will seize tomorrow ourselves." Prometheus, bound in agony, understood this better than any god. He saw that hope was the most dangerous gift of all, not because Zeus intended it as mercy, but because once planted in the human heart, It could grow beyond control. You cannot chain hope. You cannot command it. Even Zeus, in his cruelty, had left behind the seed of his own undoing. So hope lingered, silent in the shadows, neither blessing nor curse, but a weapon waiting to be claimed. And in the hearts of mortals, its ember began to glow, not as submission, but as fire. Chains can bind the flesh, eagles can devour the body, but no tyrant has ever devoured the will. High upon the Caucasus, Prometheus suffered beyond comprehension. Each morning the eagle descended, its talons raking his ribs, its beak plunging into his liver. Each night his wounds healed, only to be torn open again. His screams echoed across the mountains, a song of endless agony. To mortals below, those cries became thunder, proof that their benefactor still endured. And yet, Prometheus never begged. He did not plead for mercy. He did not curse mankind for the suffering they had brought him. His silence, his defiance, were sharper than any blade. The omniscient narrator reveals the paradox. Tyranny thrives not only on punishment, but on submission. When the prisoner kneels, the tyrant triumphs. But when the prisoner suffers and does not break, the tyrant is weakened. That is why political prisoners write poems in their cells. That is why dissidents starve themselves rather than recant. That is why enslaved people sing songs of freedom while chains rattle at their feet. Defiance transforms torment into testimony. Prometheus's chains, meant to humiliate, became his halo. His agony, meant to silence, became his voice. Every scream was an anthem, carried by the wind into mortal ears. Resist, resist, resist. Think of Mandela, confined to Robben Island, yet becoming a symbol greater than any free man. Think of Václav Havel, writing plays under censorship, each line a dagger to the state. Think of every protester beaten in the street, yet whose image sparks movements across continents. Prometheus was the first of them, the first to prove that suffering can be weaponized, that defiance can outlast chains. Zeus raged, but rage could not undo the truth. The more Prometheus suffered, the more immortal his defiance became. The eagle feasted, yet it was Olympus that starved. For every drop of blood spilled upon the mountain fed not despair, but hope. Thus Prometheus, bound and bleeding, became something more than a titan. He became the first martyr of freedom, the eternal witness that even in agony, resistance endures. And tyranny, no matter how vast, trembles before the unbroken will. Every tyranny believes its prisons are eternal, but eternity bends when heroes arrive. Ages passed. Prometheus endured, the eagle feasted, the chains rattled. Mortals told stories of the Titan in agony, their children huddled by fires that burned because of him. His pain became legend, and legend became hope. And then, hope called forth a champion. Heracles, son of Zeus, yet scorned by him, mortal in flesh, godlike in strength. The wanderer who endured 12 impossible labors, the archer whose bow sang with justice. He walked not as a god above mankind, but as a hero among them. On his journey across the wilds, Heracles came upon the Caucasus. He saw the Titan writhing in chains, saw the eagle tearing at his flesh, saw the endless torment. Where others turned away, Heracles raised his bow. His arrow, dipped in poison, gleamed against the sun. And with a single shot, he pierced the eagle's heart. The beast fell screaming into the abyss, its wings broken, its tyranny ended. For the first time in countless ages, silence fell upon the mountain. No beating of wings, no tearing of flesh, only the ragged breath of Prometheus. The omniscient narrator reveals the truth beneath the myth. Heracles was not simply a rescuer, he was the embodiment of rebellion fulfilled. the son of the tyrant who rejected tyranny, the commoner who defied gods. In every age, such heroes appear, not born from thrones, but from struggle. Spartacus against Rome, the revolutionaries against kings, the freedom fighters who raise arrows against dictatorships today. Heracles is their archetype. The arrow is their act of defiance. And yet, note the irony. Even Zeus, the tyrant, permitted this rescue. Why? Because no prison can last forever. Even the despot knows when chains begin to rot. Allowing Prometheus's release was not mercy. It was strategy, a desperate attempt to save face, to pretend generosity when in truth his power had already cracked. Prometheus, freed from his bonds, did not kneel. His scars remained, his pain eternal, but his will unbroken. The fire he had given still burned in mortal hands. The eagle was dead. The tyrant still trembled. And so, with a single arrow, the endless feast ended. Prometheus rose from his chains, not victorious, not healed, but free. And freedom, once won, cannot be chained again. Tyrants know this well. When they cannot rule through fear, they rule through theater. Mercy, when it comes from their hand, is never mercy. It is camouflage. The eagle lay dead, Heracles' arrow buried deep in its breast. The mountain was silent at last, and though Prometheus's chains remained, they no longer bound him. Heracles stood ready to shatter them, but even he could not act without Zeus's decree. For the chains were not of iron alone, they were of divine law, sealed by the tyrant himself. And so the message came down from Olympus: Prometheus shall be freed. To the gods, this was announced as generosity. To mortals it was told as forgiveness. Zeus, the magnanimous king, had relented. But the omniscient eye sees deeper. This was not mercy. It was calculation. Zeus understood that Prometheus's torment had become legend, that his suffering had made him immortal in the eyes of mankind. To continue the punishment was to make him a martyr. To release him, under Zeus's command, was to steal back control of the story. So Prometheus was unchained. The bolt split, the shackles fell, the Titan staggered to his feet. But make no mistake, he was not released because Zeus's heart softened. He was released because Zeus's grip weakened. A tyrant grants freedom only when he can no longer prevent it. The omniscient narrator unmasks the pattern. Look at history. Dictators pardoning prisoners when their regimes totter. Monarchs granting reforms when revolutions brew at their gates. Corporations offering concessions when boycotts threaten their profits. Every hollow concession is born of fear, disguised as benevolence. Zeus, master of storms, played the role of merciful king, but his thunder no longer silenced the people. The fire still burned in mortal hands. The eagle was dead. Prometheus lived, and though scarred, he walked free, his defiance intact. Thus the tyrant conceded, not out of kindness, but out of weakness. And in that hollow gesture, the cracks in Olympus grew wider. For when rulers pretend to grant what they can no longer deny, their end is already written. Empires fall, thrones crumble, chains rust, but fire, once stolen, never dies. Prometheus descended from the mountain, his body scarred, his spirit unbroken. His torment had ended, but his gift endured. The flames still glowed in mortal hands. Villages had become cities. Firesides had become forges. The ember he smuggled in a hollow reed had multiplied into 1,000 blazing beacons across the earth. Zeus still sat upon Olympus, thunderbolt in hand, pretending his power was eternal. But the truth was already written. Gods fall when men no longer fear them. The tyrant's illusion had cracked, and though he wore his crown of storms, the world below had changed forever. The omniscient narrator reveals the pattern. Tyranny always believes it is forever. Pharaohs thought so. Their names now dust. Kings thought so, their thrones now empty. Oil dynasties think so, yet their wells run dry and their palaces tremble. What endures is not the tyrant's reign, but the defiance against it. Prometheus's flame is that defiance made eternal. Consider the fire today. It burns in every lamp, every engine, every screen. It powers cities, it drives revolutions, it fuels knowledge. But deeper still, it burns in the human spirit, the refusal to kneel, the hunger to know, the will to be free. That is the true fire Prometheus gave. And though Zeus chained him, though the eagle feasted, though centuries of agony bled into the stones, Prometheus proved the ultimate truth. You can torture the rebel, but you cannot extinguish the idea. You can chain the body, but you cannot chain the flame. So the Titan's legacy endures. It flickers in every spark of creativity, in every invention that reshapes the world, and in every act of defiance when the weak dare to rise against the strong. Prometheus, the fire thief, does not live in the heavens, he lives in us, in every heart that refuses silence, in every voice that refuses chains. The flame he gave was never merely of wood and ash. It was the fire of freedom, of knowledge, of resistance. And no tyrant, no matter how high his throne, no matter how heavy his crown, can ever extinguish it. Kings may build palaces. Dictators may raise armies. Rulers may choke their people with fear. But sooner or later, the fire returns. It always returns. This is the curse of every despot, and the blessing of every soul that longs to be free. That Prometheus's gift is eternal. The fire will outlive the chains, the idea will outlast the tyrant, and the will to rise will forever burn in the shadows, waiting for its moment to blaze again.